Hello, friends. Today we're going to talk about ruts. How we get stuck in ruts, what those ruts actually mean biologically and psychologically, and how to dig ourselves out. Yep, let's talk. Hi, friends. This is Bethany Jennings, and you're listening to We Should Talk. It's a podcast where we talk about anything and everything to encourage, equip, and empower you to be a decent human. Let's talk. Okay, so I gotta warn you, this episode's gonna be a little science heavy, but I think it's fun. I was gonna say, but it's gonna be fun. I don't know, you might hate it. Sorry, but we're gonna get sciencey today. All right, are you ready? So, today we're going to dive into something very fascinating about our brains, how they create literal grooves or ruts through repeated behavior, repeated patterns of thought and behavior. Now, these patterns, they shape so much of our experience, and they can work for us. They definitely can work for us, but they can also work against us. And most commonly, we recognize it when they're working against us. And, that's why we use I'm just stuck in a rut. Well, we're going to talk about that today. But they can work for or against us, but it influences everything from daily habits to really deep personality traits. But here's the cool part. When you understand this process, you can take active steps to reshape the patterns and dig new grooves. And it will enhance your mental well-being overall when you do that. Right? So you can reformat your brain, sort of. You can reshape your brain. Literally, you can dig a new groove in your brain. And repair negative thought patterns. So in layman's terms, basically, there is, when your brain thinks something and then you do something, there's a connection there, and the more you do it, the deeper the groove gets, basically. I'm going to talk about the sciencey stuff. I'll use scientific terms and stuff in a minute. But that's basically what we're talking about here. So you're literally stuck in a rut. When this happens, I immediately do this automatically. And then you want to fix that, so we're going to talk about how to fix it. So anyways, this is the brain's wiring and cognitive quote-unquote ruts. So when we think or act a certain way, our brains form connections between neurons, and that creates pathways that serve as the basis of our habits, behaviors, responses. The neurons are connecting, right? The neurons are connected. There's a pathway between the neurons. And so research even shows, the Hebbian learning theory, it's often summarized by the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together, right? So when that's going, they get connected, wired together. It shows that phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together, shows that repetitive behaviors and thoughts actually reinforce certain neural circuits, right? So it establishes that pattern, it reinforces that circuit, and it gets stronger. So studies in neuroplasticity show us that the brain is constantly reorganizing itself by forming new connections and even creating new neurons in response to our thoughts, our actions, our experiences. And repeated behaviors, stuff that happens a lot over and over and over again, repeated behaviors and thought patterns are that's what they say, well-worn trails, right? So, the path is walked a lot. It's a well-worn trail in the brain. Actually, Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz and some of his colleagues, they published in journals the American Journal of Psychiatry, and it has actually shown, the works they published have shown cognitive behavioral repetition essentially carves pathways in the brain, forming cognitive shortcuts that we tend to fall back on. Shortcuts, aka defaults, habits, right? That's what I was talking about. It's like it's a rut. It carves pathways in the brain because those neurons have been firing and that circuit is happening so much between the two. It's like, oh, this is just what we're doing. This is the path of least resistance. This is where we're going. Anyways, so the repetitive cognitive behavioral patterns carve pathways in the brain and it forms shortcuts. So that becomes our default. Anyways, so some defaults are good, but some are not so much. So there are negative patterns and automatic responses that we need to talk about. So these carved pathways, or the ruts, are essentially neural circuits that have become really well-traveled routes, right? And they can be constructive or destructive. In terms of psychological disorders like depression or anxiety, researchers actually have documented that negative thought patterns like rumination, like just hanging out, dwelling on it, often reinforce the pathways and deepen the pathways, which makes it that much harder to work and recover from disorders. For instance, when people with anxiety face a really stressful situation or setting, their brains quickly, like almost immediately, activate a set of established neural pathways that trigger anxiety responses. So if they've been anxious in this kind of setting before, extremely high likelihood they're going to be anxious this time. That is their default. This phenomenon, this phenomenon of like immediately triggering responses is called automaticity. That's a fun word to say. It's called automaticity in psychology. Automaticity is basically where repetitive cognitive processes can eventually run without any conscious effort. You're just automatically doing it. You don't even think about it. You do it. Like driving on a road. Like you drive the same road from work to home, home to work, and you don't even really think about the turns anymore. And all of a sudden you wake up from the fog and you're like, how did I even get home? That's crazy. Right? So that you just do it. You don't have to put forth a lot of conscious effort because it's such a norm for you. So when a negative pattern becomes automatic, it's very challenging to break that pattern. And we essentially end up trapped in our own ruts in our brain. So the good news, though, is because of neuroplasticity, the brain can change. So the positive side of this is while our brains do form these ruts, they also have a really impressive ability to form new pathways, a concept known as neuroplasticity. So groundbreaking studies put out in Nature Neuroscience, was published in the journal Nature Neuroscience. It shows that we can actually rewire our brains through intentional behavior and thinking patterns. So where the automaticity is like, I'm not even thinking about it. This is very subconscious. I'm just doing this without any conscious effort. If you put forth a conscious effort, you can rewire your brain. But it has to be very intentional. You have to do it on purpose until it becomes habitual. So imagine cognitive patterns like, this is what I was saying before, it's like trails through a forest. If we always walk the same path, it's going to become smoother and easier to travel. But when we forge a new path, it's very difficult at first. We got to cut down some bushes, we find some thorns, we may run into some dangerous situations. But over time, the new trail becomes just as walked on as the old trail. So we keep walking the new trail, the old trail is going to grow up and it won't be as easy to go that way. And our brains are going to go path of least resistance, literally. So When that neural circuit shuts down, the negative neural circuit shuts down, and because we are consciously choosing positive connections in our brain, we will automatically go to the positive eventually. But you have to be intentional at first. The old path starts to fade while the new path starts getting clearer, clearer, clearer. So in order to do that, how can we do that? How can we be intentional? How can we break negative patterns? Well, we do that with cognitive behavioral interventions, or CBI, right? So the process of breaking a negative pattern and forming new ones is the central concept of cognitive behavioral therapy. This is one of the most researched therapeutic approaches. CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, it teaches people to identify the negative thought patterns and replace them with constructive, positive thought patterns. So, studies in journals like Psychological Bulletin, stuff like that, but they've documented that cognitive behavioral therapy can actually result in measurable changes. Like, you can actually measure the change. It's not like these tiny little, perhaps. It's not just qualitative, like it's quantitative. You can measure the change in the brain structure and function, specifically in regions associated with emotional regulation and stress response, which is most of the negative things that we are doing with our brains is emotional regulation and stress response. So by consciously replacing a negative thought with a more constructive one, we engage alternative neural circuits and we start trotting that path and making the positive the norm. So instead of I am not capable, I can't do this, we say I'm working on improving myself every day. Right? And we engage the positive, and just like repetition got you the negative rut, repetition's going to get you the positive rut too. So repetition is crucial because you're going to start going to the negative automatically. Remember, that's what automaticity is. Automatically you're going to go to the negative, but you make that conscious effort to go positive, and that rut's going to get deeper, deeper, deeper the more you trot it. And that will become your norm. So repetition is crucial. Just like the old rut was formed with repeated use, new patterns have to be repeated to form durable changes in the brain. Like if you're going to stick with the change, you've got to keep repeating that process. So let's talk about some practical ways to actually do that though. Because we start talking about psychology and neuroplasticity and automaticity and CBT. Like there's a lot of sciencey stuff going on. Let's talk about actual ways to do this. So what are some practical ways to form new, more positive pathways in the brain? One of the ways is mindfulness and meditation, right? Mindfulness and meditation. There are studies published that talk about mindfulness practices that can help individuals observe their thoughts without judgment. Like that's part of it. It's like, I know I'm thinking this. I'm not a horrible person for thinking this. I'm just a person. Let's readjust. So the process, it weakens the connection to automatic negative thought patterns. It gives individuals a chance to reroute their thinking. And they've actually, they do MRI. They've done MRIs. MRI studies show that people who practice mindfulness regularly have changes in areas of the brain associated with self-regulation and focus. So if you're practicing mindfulness you can't just do this once. That was the whole thing. It has to be repeated. You can't just do this once. It has to become a discipline for you, right? Mindfulness. Now, mindfulness might look different for someone who is religious or not religious, right? So mindfulness for someone who has no concept of Christ may just be sitting and thinking all the thoughts they want to think and rerouting them, right? Mindfulness for a Christian might look like prayer, interaction with the Lord, and really thinking on the goodness of the Lord and thinking on the blessings and thinking on, like, there have been multiple studies that show when gratitude is engaged, the anxiety portion shuts down. Like, the brain can't have both of them going at the same time. I need to do an episode about that. Anyways, so yeah, think on these things, whatever things are lovely, true, pure. Think on those things. That's the scriptural perspective of this. Be mindful of those things. Excuse me. Another thing is like visualization and mental rehearsal. So, like, picture it in your brain, positive behaviors and outcomes, and it will stimulate the brain in ways similar to the actual experience, right? So imagine you're going through it every single step of the process. I'm walking into the room full of people, blah, 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 blah. This is what I will start to feel, but when I start to feel this, I will do this instead. I will reroute my brain. I will affirm myself with this thing, or I will quote this scripture and it will reroute me. Like, go through the whole process, like mentally rehearse what's happening. Because it activates the brain very, very similar to like the actual thing happening. There's actually a study in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. It demonstrates that mental rehearsal helps to strengthen alternative pathways. So like, mental rehearsal helps you reroute your brain. It makes it easier to adopt new habits and behaviors. Like, you may not get the chance to exercise this new route every single day, every single hour, in actual real life, but you can do it in your mind. Mental rehearsal, right? Another thing is self-affirmations and positive self-talk. We talk so ugly to ourselves. There are things that I say to myself I would not say to my worst enemy, right? And we're supposed to be our own friend, and we're not even being friendly to ourselves. There are things I say to myself or think about myself that I don't think about my best friend at all. I would never say to my best friend. But we have a lot of very negative self-talk. And we really need to be careful about that, because we're talking to children of the Lord. When we talk to ourselves, we should be better. But anyways, so the self-affirmation theory suggests that repeating positive statements about yourself can lead to positive changes in neural pathways, right? So instead of, I'm so bad at this, we need to change that to, I'm working on being better at this. I'm improving at this every day. When we catch ourselves in those negative thought cycles, we replace them with affirming thoughts, and it will really start to weaken the old neural circuit pathways and establish new ones, more constructive ones. Another thing, really, it doesn't have to be some massive display of behavior change, but just small, very small behavior modifications. Because even small intentional changes have a very profound effect. A very small intentional change in behavior can have a very profound effect. There's behavioral and cognitive psychotherapy. It notes that by making the small modifications, like replacing mindless phone scrolling with a few minutes of reading or journaling, little things like that, we lay down a new foundation for healthier behavioral circuits. Little things like that. Like, I found that I was doom scrolling. I would lay in bed and doom scroll. And then it's a time sucker. It's such a waste of time. So I established for myself, I'm not opening any social media. Laying in bed, I'm not doing it. I will read a book while I'm laying in my bed. Sometimes on my phone, but I like a physical book better if I can do it. Or I'll play like Sudoku on my phone in bed, but I'm not opening up social media. I'm not doing it. And that has helped me to not be so worn out, right? Mentally exhausted with the information overload and comparison and all the things. But also, it helps me to sleep at a decent time. So just little things like that, little behavior. It doesn't have to be like you throw your phone away and get a pager. Everyone calm down. Everyone calm down. Just small changes. Small changes actually have a really big effect. And it reroutes those circuits. Another thing is actually setting goals and rewarding yourself when the goal is accomplished. There are multiple studies that show setting specific and attainable goals has to be attainable. It's actually very rewarding. It rewarding that progress, like it changes your brain. So you set the attainable, very specific and attainable goals, and then you reward the progress. It actually engages the brain's, what's the word? Dopaminergic. I can't say the word. Anyways, it engages the pathways. Sorry, I can't say the word. I can't think of the word. And it reinforces new behaviors. So when we reward ourselves, we're essentially teaching the brain to associate new behaviors with pleasure, new behaviors with dopamine, right? And it strengthens those new positive behaviors and pathways over time. So, while our brains may be prone to forming ruts, quote unquote, because of our repeated behaviors and thought patterns, they also have a really, really incredible ability to change. And by consciously, intentionally adopting new behaviors and thinking patterns and strategies, we can actively reshape our brain's pathways and make new ruts. And it will foster our overall well-being, our resilience, our growth. So combining practical approaches like mindfulness or prayer, positive visualization, goal setting, intentional practice, self-affirmation, scripture reading, things like that. By using that, we realize that we are reshaping our minds and we are not at the mercy of our old thought patterns. Instead, we forge new paths. We are not just stuck and there's nothing we can do. You can actually change your brain, but you need to pray about it. As a Christian, we should be praying about these things, that the Lord would help us, right, to renew our minds. So, anyways, that's ruts. That's how we get stuck in ruts, right? And that's what psychology has to say about it. That's some scripture about it. Yeah. So this is actually a little longer episode than some of my other ones. But I think it's just so important that we understand we are not at the mercies of our brain. We are the boss of our brain. We're the boss of our brain. We just have to actively pursue the change that we want. Scripture talks about renewing our minds, right? That's not just some foreign concept. That is actual, like, people think scripture and psychology are at war. They are not at war. There are so many things that, there's so many things that I have learned in psychology, and I'm like, wait, the Bible's been saying that. What? Why are we just now? Psychology didn't discover that till when? So much of science in general, the Bible, scripture was there before, and science is just catching up. So yeah, the Bible does talk about renewing your mind. It's actually in Ephesians talks about it, being constantly renewed in the spirit of your mind, having fresh mental spiritual attitude. It's Ephesians 4:23. Romans 12 talks about by the renewal of your mind, do not be conformed to this world. Yeah, it's scripture, but psychology supports scripture. Scripture is the foundation. And psychology and science are just like, oh yeah, scripture was right. So anyways, if you find yourself stuck in a rut, if you don't like certain behaviors, certain patterns that you have in your life, take control of it. Do not become subject to anything or anyone, including yourself. We are only subject to Christ. So, I love you, and I hope this makes you a better human. I'll talk to you later. Well, that was fun. I'm glad you stuck around for the whole thing. And thank you for talking to me today. Y'all go like and follow and review and do all the podcast things that people do. And don't forget to be a good human.